Good morning, everyone. Yeah, we can get started. Can you hear me fine at the back there? Awesome. Cool. So the title of my talk is called Beyond the Window, how I used the improved WindowSize Class tooling to make my Android app better. And I am Ahmed Tikiwa. You can find me on Twitter or X, as it's called today. Ahmed_Tikiwa, so that's my handle there. And a little bit about me. So I'm a software engineer. I am based in the Netherlands. I work for a company called Bol, and it's an online retail company that operates in the Netherlands and in Belgium. So I'm an Android engineer there. I'm also part of the Tracked.tv team. And basically Tracked is an online platform. We have a website and a mobile app, Android and iOS, where if you are really interested in TV shows, in movies, and you want to keep track of those, then the platform is for you. So you can basically discover what's new and what's hot and so forth. I used to live in South Africa. I used to live in Cape Town, and I relocated to the Netherlands 2 years ago. And I've been a Google developer expert since 2022, so just over 2 years. So I'm a GDE in Android. If any of you are interested in becoming a GDE, just let me know. We're actually more GDEs as well at the conference this year. So if you're ever interested in just being a part of the program or just want to hear more about it, feel free to come and talk to me. So the agenda for today, I'll be touching on what does the market look like. So this market here with regards to the WindowSize classes that I'll be touching on, adapting what to do and what not to do, what are WindowSize classes, material design plus WindowSize classes, a recap of how I added WindowSize classes to my app last year and what the developments are this year. Then I'll be introducing the scaffold layouts, adding navigation suite scaffold, which will be a code walkthrough, customizing the navigation, as well as adding the list detail pane scaffold. So the app that will be the focus of this talk is UpNext TV Series Manager. I created this app in 2015 as a passion project. It used to be closed source and now it is an open source project, so anyone in here can contribute to it if you want to. It's an Android app that is fully written in Kotlin as well, and the UI is fully composed, Jetpack composed. And so I wrote this in 2015. It is also part of the Google Developers Dev Library. It has been on the Google Play Store as well ever since then. It has a modest download of 2,000, which I am happy about. So the app has got 4 main screens, a search screen, a dashboard screen, an explore screen, as well as an account screen, as you can see there in the GIF. So this market that I referred to earlier, right? The Android developer ecosystem has evolved over the years. Technology has evolved. The devices that we use have also evolved. Back then, we used to have very tiny mobile devices that we could interact on. Now today, it is way more. We now have a watch. So you can have a Galaxy Watch device or even a Pixel Watch. So you can interact with Android on your hand, basically. You've got mobile phones, smartphones. You've got a Chromebook, which can basically act as an Android device as well. Then you've got a foldable device. You've got a flip device. And as you can see, the devices that your Android app can run on is not just a phone or a tablet. As you can see there are multiple devices that your users can be able to interact with your Android app. So this basically bears the question of, is it a phone, is it a tablet? That actually needs to go away. So we need to now start thinking differently and no longer think about the device that your app is running on, but rather the amount of screen space that you have. And this is what this talk will be focusing on. So within Android Studio, you can actually develop your app for multiple form factors. You can develop your app for a phone, for a tablet, for Wear OS, for a desktop, for TV, for automotive, as well as the legacy type devices, such as the very old devices that Google used to produce. So within Android Studio, you already have the tooling to be able to write apps that can focus on different form factors. So the Android documentation basically talks about what adaptive UI is, but then it also centers around what you should do as a developer and what you shouldn't do. And these are branched into different categories. So the first one is that your app, whichever app that you're going to develop, you need to make sure that you can support displays that take up the entire device screen space. So not just occupying a little space within the device, but making sure that your app can adapt to the entire space that your user will allow it to. And I'll touch on what that actually means in a bit. So you need to also be able to support resizable windows, which basically is also tying into multi-window support. So right now, as I mentioned before, we have got a huge market, right? So when your users are going to be using your app on a tablet, they can actually have two apps side by side, and it actually happens. So a user can actually have YouTube on the left-hand side and maybe a Gmail app on the right-hand side, which means your app is not going to occupy the entire space. You're now going to have a small space on the app itself. So you need to make sure that your app is resizable. So if the user decides to shrink your app does not crash. Your app can actually still look good whatever screen space that it's on. So this is the support it's referring to. Then your app needs to be able to support portrait and landscape. Do not lock your orientation. Make sure that your app can support both orientations. Then your app needs to be able to support displays in foldable device states. So if the user decides to fold their device, your app should still be able to run if they unfold it, if they rotate it, and so forth. So basically your app should not crash, but be able to adapt to whatever screen space that it has been given. So the do's and don'ts, so these are the different areas. So one is resizability, supporting resizability and multi-window mode. Orientation, for any display size or window mode, portrait and landscape is supported by your app. Then aspect ratio. So because of the varied screen and window sizes, this also means that you're also going to get a varied range of aspect ratios. So the aspect ratio is not always going to be the same because the screen space is also going to change. Compose. So you need to use Jetpack Compose. That is the recommended design toolkit right now, to step away from XML and so forth, but to also use Compose because it was designed for adaptive UI. Then window sizes, which I will touch on within this talk. So paying attention to which window size your app has over the amount of device screen size that you're using. So is it a phone, is it a tablet basically? You no longer need to do that anymore. So resizability, the do here is that you need to enable multi-window and multitasking support. So basically this will help your users to be able to be more productive. So if your app can run on the right-hand side and the user has YouTube on the left-hand side, then you are supporting multi-window on the user's particular device. And this is what the users actually want. They want to be able to use multiple apps at the same time without any restrictions. And they want your app to still look good and to still perform well when it's in multi-window mode. Then if it's API 24 or lower, then you need to set the resizable activity to true. So this basically enrolls your app into resizable support. But if it's API 24 plus, it's going to be true by default anyway. Then what you shouldn't do is to set resizable activity to false for any particular scenario, because this will make sure that your app is not adaptive. So the recommendation here is set resizable activity to true if it's API 24 or below, or just to leave it as the default, as it always will be. Then when it comes to screen orientation, you need to remove the screen orientation attribute from your manifest. So this will basically restrict things for your users. So WindowSize classes will always change, will always be detected irrespective of whether you're going to choose the screen orientation attribute. So that's something to bear in mind. But remember, don't use the screen orientation attribute. Then don't restrict your activity orientation, because your locked app orientation on your device, on a large device, for instance, is going to make your app letterboxed. What this basically means is that your app is going to sit in the middle of the screen. It's not going to occupy the entire screen space. Obviously, this is not an experience that your users want to see. They want to be able to see an app that expands, that displays across the entire space. So if you are locking your orientation, your app is only going to occupy a small space on the screen. So try to avoid this. Then when it comes to aspect ratio, you need to adapt your app to fit the display despite the relative dimensions that are provided to you. So you need to remove the min aspect ratio and the max aspect ratio from the app manifest. Or if you use resizable activity, then this will basically make sure that your app is adaptive by default. So don't try and control the relative dimensions. In other words, don't try to control the aspect ratio. Don't use these attributes, because then it might actually work against you when you're trying to make your app adaptive. So if the screen or window aspect ratio is not compatible with the app's aspect ratio, then your app is going to be letterboxed. Then when it comes to Compose, the recommendation, please use Jetpack Compose. It was designed purely to be able to be adaptive across different screen sizes. And then the don't rely on deprecated APIs, but rather really harness the power of Jetpack Compose. So basically step away from XML and try to use Jetpack Compose as much as you can. Then when it comes to window size, you need to use the app window size and not the device screen size. So you need to no longer say, is it a phone or is it a tablet? Because as I showed you, we now have a watch. People can use your app on a laptop, on a Chromebook. People can use your app on a foldable device. People can use your app on a tablet. The devices are big. So basically you need to step away from the screen size, but the app size. So that's the recommendation there. So you can use WindowSize classes to get the app WindowSize class. And you can use a function called current window adaptive info. This will basically give you the information of what the current window size class is. Then the do not overlook the power of window size classes. They can actually do a lot for you. And then you shouldn't calculate the window size class using deprecated APIs. So I've been touching on window size classes, and you're probably wondering, okay, so what is this? So I'll touch on it here. So the definition from the documentation is, WindowSize classes are a set of opinionated viewpoint breakpoints that help you design, develop, and test responsive and adaptive application layouts. Now, these WindowSize classes come in three buckets. So you've got compact, which is basically the width that is up to 600 dp. So I'm going to be touching on the width window size class, by the way, for this talk. Then you've got the medium window size class, which is between 600 and 840 dp in terms of width. Then you've got expanded, which is anything greater than 840 dp. And as you can see there, so a phone that is basically in portrait mode is compact, and then when you rotate it, it becomes expanded. So that's how quickly the window size class can change for your app. So material design also touches on the window size classes. There's documentation that will help you, that will guide you into how to write your app based on different window size classes. So it actually has guidelines for compact, for medium, for expanded, as well as larger device screen sizes, such as a Chromebook, for instance. So all of this information is there available to you to help you write apps that can support different window size classes. So the window size class guidelines is based on the following. The available window space is dynamic. So as I mentioned earlier, if you basically rotate your phone from portrait to landscape, the window size class is already changed. So which means the space that your app has at any particular point in time can change just like that. So that's why you need to step away from, is it a phone or is it a tablet? Because within a moment, it can change to have an increased window size space or a decreased space. So the changes with the user behavior will dictate which window size class is currently available to you. And then multi-window mode, unfolding a phone like a foldable device is also going to impact the window size class. Then the orientation change, if the user decides to change from landscape to portrait and portrait to landscape, that is also going to influence the window size class. So last year, I actually touched on window size classes and how I implemented it within my open source app, UpNext TV Series Manager. And just a recap of what I did then. So I got in contact with my designer at work, Michiel Beselling. I told him, look, I'd like to add window size classes to my open source app. Can you help me with some designs? Because I'm not that good of a designer. So I basically leaned on to him to be able to give me designs or provide me designs that I could use for my app. And so what he did is took an overview of my app, of Up Next TV Series Manager, of the different screens, and then to try and decide what to do in terms of adapting the UI for the different WindowSize classes. So what he then did, he put all the designs into Figma, and then he started creating different designs for the different WindowSize classes, for compact, medium, and expanded. So for compact, he basically made just minor improvements there in terms of the ordering of the bottom navigation bar as well as the toolbar at the top. For medium, he basically introduced what is called the navigation rail. And this is one of the recommendations that you'll find in the material design guidelines. So if it's on a tablet, on a medium size window size that is, the recommendation is to have a navigation rail. And then on an expanded layout, you can either have a navigation rail or a navigation drawer. And so these are the designs that he provided to me. He also improved as well the inside layouts that I found within the app itself to basically make use of the biggest screen space that I have for my app. As well as on expanded, he did the same thing as well. So this year at Google I/O, the Android team actually introduced a set of scaffold layouts. And this is actually the game changer that they introduced this year. So because last year, we had to manually detect the WindowSize class by using certain features, and then we also had to manually add in if it's a bottom navigation, if it's a navigation rail, if it's a navigation drawer. We had to do this manually. So the Android team also realized that, look, this is actually taking developers more time than they should. So why don't we introduce layouts that can help them do this thing faster? And this is when they introduced these, what are called the scaffold layouts at Google I/O this year. So they introduced 3 scaffold layouts. The first one is called Navigation Suite Scaffold. And then this basically introduces you to tools to be able to give your users the right navigation option depending on which WindowSize class there is. Then you've got List Detail Pane Scaffold. Then you've got Supporting Pane Scaffold. And I'll touch on each one now. So the Navigation Suite Scaffold is to do with the type of navigation that your users will see. If they're on a compact device, you want to see a bottom navigation. If they're on a medium device, you want to see a navigation rail, as I mentioned, or a navigation drawer. So this Navigation Suite Scaffold will add this in automatically for you. You don't have to do much. And I'll show you how I actually added it in. Then the List Detail Pane Scaffold. So think of a list of emails, and then you want to have a view where you can click on an email and actually show it. So in a tablet device, it only makes sense that you have the list of emails on the left and then the view of the email that has been opened on the right-hand side, right next to it. So you've got a list and a detail. So that's why it's called a List Detail Pane Scaffold. Then Supporting Pane Scaffold. Think of an app that displays like YouTube, for instance, or movies. And so you have main content that will be at the top there. Then you've got what is called supporting content or supporting pane, which will be maybe the similar movies or the similar TV shows or something along those lines. So that will be the supporting list to the main content that you have there on the top there. So I basically focused on 2 of the scaffolds. I didn't use the Supporting Pane Scaffold. I used the Navigation Suite Scaffold as well as the List Detail Pane Scaffold. And I'm going to walk you through briefly on how I added it to my app. So in terms of dependencies, you basically just need to add the Adaptive Navigation Suite to your Android app. Then what I did before, like I told you, I used to add this in manually. So I actually had 3 different screens. I had a screen called Compact, which will then add me, then I created a compact screen. Then I had, if it was a medium WindowSize class, then I added the medium screen. Then if it was an expanded WindowSize class, then I created the expanded screen. And then each of these screens was switching between bottom navigation, navigation drawer, or navigation rail. So as you can see, I was having to do this manually. Then you then have to define what are called navigation destinations. So this could be an enum class. And in here, you can define the direction, so what the user is going to navigate to. And then you can define an icon, so what is going to show in the menu. And then the label that it will be displayed. So in my case, for Up Next, I've got the dashboard, I've got the search screen, I've got the explore screen, as well as the tracked account screen. Then to use the Navigation Suite Scaffold, I no longer have to define a compact screen, a medium screen, and an expanded screen. All I had to do was just define one screen, and then I define the navigation suite scaffold inside it. So in here, all you just need is the nav controller, and then the navigator, which will then navigate between the two screens. Then you need to have a hold on the current backstack, so to determine if the user navigates to a screen, where should they go back to? So there I can determine that from the nav controller. And then I added the navigation suite scaffold. So here I've got a navigation suite items, which will be each and every item in that enum class. And then I'll just loop over that using a for each, and then add that to the navigation suite items. Then for the content, all I just gave it was one composable that will display the data that is displayed on the screen for a particular screen. Then you can also customize it. So if you want a navigation rail or a navigation drawer, you can also do that as well if you want to, depending on the requirements for your app. And all you need to do is just add what is called the adaptive layout, which is part of Material 3. Then the adaptive info, this will tell you whether what type of WindowSize class your app currently is in at the particular point in time. And then so in my case, I'm saying if it's expanded, I want to show the navigation drawer. If it's anything else, then I want you to use the default. So then I'm saying the navigation suite scaffold should use whatever tooling that it has as default under the hood, or I can override it and tell it, no, I want you to use the navigation drawer when it's expanded. And then for the layout type, you just basically pass in the custom navigation type which you've created, and then this is how it will look like. So in my case, I'm using the navigation suite scaffold, and this is now defining a navigation drawer there on the left-hand side. This is all part of the library. I didn't have to do much, as you saw there. The material design guidelines also do highlight that if you have 5 or more primary destinations, then you should actually use the navigation drawer. But if you've got less than that, you should try to use the navigation rail instead. This is just to do with what actually makes sense for your users. You want to make sure that you have the right tool as well as what they're going to see visually and what will make sense to them. So this is what it actually looks like when I added the navigation suite scaffold. As you saw there in the code, it was one screen that I had to create, and this library takes care of adding the bottom navigation, the navigation rail, as well as the navigation drawer if I want to. And as you can see, I've only got 4 destinations, so that's why I'm using a navigation rail instead of a navigation drawer. Then the list detail pane scaffold. So my goal was I have a list of TV shows on the left-hand side, and if it's on a tablet, this is how it'll look like. And then if the user clicks on a TV show, they're going to see that detail screen on the right-hand side. Now, I want these 2 screens to come together, to have a list on the left as well as the detail on the right-hand side. So I want to use this list detail pane scaffold in order to achieve that. So to do that, I had to add 3 dependencies: adaptive layout, adaptive navigation, as well as the adaptive navigation Android dependency. Then I needed to define what is called a content class. And this basically represents the data for the information that will be passed from one screen to the next. And you just need to make sure that it's parcelable. So to annotate it with @parcelize, as well as extend the parcelable class. Then I defined my screen called dashboard screen. And then in there, I'm doing one of 3 things. 3 things basically. I define the navigator. I define the back navigation. So when my user clicks back or clicks on the back arrow. And then 3, I then define the list detail pane scaffold. So the first one, which is the navigator, this enables you to move between the list and the detail when it's on an expanded or a medium-sized device. It also keeps track of the state. So if the user is currently in a compact WindowSize class, it will know that, oh, I don't need to show the list detail pane scaffold, but then if they change it and it's now a bigger screen space, it will keep track of that state for you automatically. So it will actually handle all the config changes. Then the back handler, if the user decides to click the back button or a back navigation within your app, it also knows what to do. But then you need to pass in this thing called a back handler. And then you just pass it in the navigator and then tell it If it can navigate back, then it will actually navigate for you, manage all of that for you automatically. You don't have to do anything much. And then it's also dependent on the current window size class, as I mentioned. So if it's on a phone, on a compact device, it's not going to kick in, but when the screen becomes bigger, then it's going to kick in automatically. So the list detail pane scaffold, there are only 5 items which you need to define. You need to define a directive as well as a value. And all of this you can get from the scaffold navigator, which I've passed in there. Then you need to define the list. So this is the composable that will represent the list of items to show on the screen, as well as the detail, which will show the item that's going to be clicked on the screen. So for my list, I'm defining the dashboard screen, which is that list of TV shows that I showed you. And then I'm also wrapping it in an animated pane so that it'll animate when the user clicks on something and then when it shows the detail. So this is all automatic and under the hood. You don't have to do much. Then you just tell it, this will be the screen that I want you to navigate to, as you see there where it says on click. And then for the detail pane, I then give it the detail screen. So in this case, show detail screen. And this will represent the information of what has been clicked when the user clicks on a list item and wanting to go to the detail item. And then this is how it will look like. So the 2 pane split, where I now have the list on the left and the detail on the right-hand side. And then when it comes to window size class changes, so as I said, when it becomes compact, so when the user rotates the device, you can see it's no longer list or detail. It's just going to be list. And then when they actually rotate the device, you will now see it'll be list and detail side by side. So in terms of resources, if you want to build a list detail pane layout, this is the documentation on the developers.android.com website. If you want to build adaptive navigation, that's the information there. Then supporting different screen sizes. So there's material design guidance there that will help you be able to know how to design for the different window size classes. Then the adaptive do's and don'ts that I mentioned earlier, all the different categories around resizability, using compose, aspect ratio, and so forth. All of this is in the documentation. Then if you want to scale your app across screen, so the blog that I mentioned where Google introduced this at Google I/O, that's the information there, the blog article there. Then up next, TV Series Manager. If you'd like to contribute to the app, feel free. It really is open source and open to any contributions from any one of you. Then if you want to know the large screen compatibility checklist, so this basically tells you if your app is compatible enough to say, yes, this app is adaptive. So you can do a list of checks to determine whether your app is now fully adaptive. There is documentation that will help you get to that place. And grazie.